I'm just the moderator, and I'll introduce the speakers. I have an 8-year-old with albinism. I also have a 10-year-old with Down syndrome, so I'm very familiar with IDEIA. It's an important part of our everyday school life. Our speaker today is Julie Urban. Julie is the Vice President of the National Association for Parents of Children with Visual Impairments, and the mother of Rebecca, who is 32 years old and blind with additional disabilities. She's been a certified teacher of students who are visually impaired for more than 30 years. She's been on both sides of the table for IEPs. She's taught all grades in public schools, in preschool programs, in residential schools, and in infant toddler programs. She's become an advocate for families and their children, especially those who do not use speech to communicate. So, Julie Urban.
Good morning, thank you. By a show of hands, is everybody in here pretty much familiar with IEPs and IDEIA? Okay, this is going to be interactive, folks. I don't want to just stand up here for an hour or so and talk to you. I want questions, and everybody answer what your experience has been. The handout that you received, I just received this. I was in Arkansas at the Arkansas NAPI parent group a couple of weeks ago, and they did a session on it, and this is probably one of the best handouts I've seen for parents. And I asked them if I could reproduce it, and they said yes. It's from the Arkansas State Department of Special Education, and it's one of the ones that's written pretty neatly, specifically for parents, so you don't have to go through every single line of the law. Just a little bit of my background. As you heard, my daughter's now out of school, but when she was in school, she attended Perkins Preschool for the Blind. Then she was in Boston Public Schools. Then she was we moved after that, and she was in a public school in Phoenix, Arizona. And at that point, because she has additional disabilities, we also had a lot of issues with possibility of autism, and so we were lucky enough in Arizona to have Lorna Jean King, who is one of the leaders in autism, and she has a school. And so Becca went to that school for 2 years. It did really well, but then we hit the point where blindness was the major issue. And so she ended up spending the rest of her education at the School for the Blind in Tucson. If you talk to her today, she would say she would rather be at the School for the Blind in Tucson than anywhere else and come home on weekends. She really made friends down there and was very socially active down there in spite of her disabilities. And life is different when you come home and you have additional disabilities and you're not going out to the job force. So I've been on both sides of the table. Neither side is better than the other side. The one thing I hope everyone understands is that this is not an adversary situation with the school districts. When you go in and you're meeting with the school districts, please remember that they're there for the benefit of your child. You may have some disagreements, but try and work them out, and you know that the law backs you and that you do have options when it comes if you cannot work them out with the school district. Do not be afraid to go on to that next step. So let's start from the beginning. Please interrupt, ask questions at any time. I'm not one of those that says wait till later. We have a few more handouts if you didn't get, if you came in late. Susan has some handouts over there, so raise your hand if you need the handouts. One more. No, I don't. So do you have any more, Sue? Oh, okay. If anybody took two for the same family, if you could share. Thank you. Okay. There's a sign-up sheet that's going to go around just so that we can have some attendance and know how many people are at each session. As we all know, IDEIA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is set up for parents and children to have their rights recognized and seen in classrooms so that they can attend regular education if that is your choice. The law does say that there are very specific steps that need to be followed. And initially, parents have control in just about every situation. The only time you lose control is if you don't respond to the school district's request. There have been parents out there who the districts have sent 2 or 3 requests to attend a meeting or make phone calls, and the parents still don't respond to that. At that point, the district, as long as they've documented attempts were made to be involved with the families, they can go on and do what's best for the child without family involvement. You know that everything has to be done in writing. So if you're requesting any changes in the IEP or you're requesting your first IEP, make sure you put it in writing, because at that point they have X amount of business days in which to respond to your letter. If it's not in writing, and if you should end up going into arbitration, you can't prove anything. So whenever you send, if you do an email, if you send it by snail mail, make sure you keep copies of it and start your file for each of your children. Keep everything in one place so that you're not running around looking for things. The district, to start off, has to do an evaluation on your, to see if your children are disabled. Part of the problem is kids with albinism don't have necessarily the cognitive disabilities that some of the other children have, but they still, under the law, have a right due to their visual impairment to get services. So you can tell the school district that you understand that they're not cognitively impaired, but they still need services. Large print books, color coding, yes. Okay, IDEA is the law, the federal law that covers the entire United States, and every state has to follow it, and it spells out your parental rights as to what they have to follow to create the IEP. The IEP is the Individual Education Program. So what happens is when your child goes to school, the IEP is the packet of paper that spells out exactly what services your child will be receiving each year, okay? It falls underneath the law. It's the piece of paper that you come out with so that you know exactly what's happening with your child. Thank you. So again, the other thing is that the IEPs must be done in the native language of the family. So if you're Spanish speaking, if you're Chinese speaking, whatever, they have to have an interpreter there so that the families understand completely what is being said and what is being explained to them. Some states get around the printed copy of it because they don't always have the ability to print in all the different languages, but they get around that by, you have to have a translator there at all times. And so if you call the families and you're not English speaking, then they have to have a translator on the phone also, so in order to comply with the law. The next page, consent. They cannot do an initial evaluation on your child without your permission, and that is critical. Remember that you have to sign off and say, yes, you agree to have your child evaluated. They cannot place your child in special education without your agreement. Your child cannot receive any services, related services at all, speech, OT, vision services, without your agreement. And they cannot reevaluate your child every 3 years without your agreement. So you are involved in every single step of the way. They have to notify you when anything happens. You can also withdraw your consent at any time. Just because you said one time you agree to it doesn't mean that that stays throughout your child's 12 years of education. At any point in time you can say, no, I disagree, I'm not going to allow this to happen, and you have the right to do that. If you refuse to do it, the public agency, the school district, still has an avenue which they can go through mediation and bring everyone to the table and do process hearing if the school district truly believes that they need to provide special education for your child. So although you have the rights to control everything, if you refuse and the school district still feels strongly that they need to evaluate your child, what happens next is you go to mediation and you resolve it through mediation. And it protects both sides of the parties involved. And then the evaluation, remember the evaluation, it has to not be biased for race or culture. The test has to be done in the native language. It needs to be validated tests, used standardized tests, which are very few. There are no standardized tests, unless Susan knows some, for visually impaired children. It's basically what happens is the school psychologists take bits and pieces from the standardized tests that are not affected by vision. Or if they do one of the standardized tests and they strongly feel that vision is interfering with a piece of that test, they write in their evaluation saying that this score has been impacted by the child's vision, so that it all flows freely. The person testing your child must be trained. It can't be just a regular education teacher. It can't be an aide or an assistant. It has to be a trained person that knows the test and knows why they're testing. And that's an important piece for you to remember. And they have to follow the procedures of the test. Every test comes with guidelines that need to be followed. They also need to do it in a setting where the child is comfortable, so that they shouldn't be testing kids in busy rooms. Even a room like this would be too much for a lot of our kids to be tested in. And the educational program can be determined based on more than one test. One test isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all to it. They also have to test in all suspected areas of disability. So if they suspect daily living skills, for instance, there should be a portion of a test somewhere that's checking out, is your child age appropriately doing what any other child is doing for daily living skills, dressing themselves, feeding, all of that sort of thing.
I have a question on that.
Yes. Did you have, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you had an independent evaluation, which includes IDEIA or... And the school district is required to pay for that.
If it's an independent evaluation, can I use her OT in Vermont for all institutions from the
Typically, what happens in some of the school districts, and what you have to do is first you have to let the school district know that you're planning to do an independent evaluation. Okay? Then, in order for the school district to pay for it, they have a list of people that they have certified as being qualified people to do their evaluations, and so they will give you that list and you can choose from that list. If your person is not on the list, you might go to them and say, this is who she is, these are her qualifications or his qualifications, and see if they will okay it.
One other question. I think the lowest was her purpose when she gets that.
Who paid for the evaluation?
For the
Perkins Val. Oh, it's free. Well, you can still use it to bring it to the school district and say, here's another one.
This is a professional.
Right. Yes, no, outside evaluations, you have the right to request them, but you have to do it, you have to notify the school district that that's what you're doing. You just cannot go do it and then turn around and say to the school district, I went for an outside evaluation, here's the cost of it, and here's the results.
Perkins is not, Perkins is we use for pediatric alcohol, Perkins things work together.
Perkins is a little bit different because it's a school, and a lot of the school districts in New England use them.
The low vision clinic is not, it's in Perkins, but it's a specific low vision clinic.
Correct, but the overall umbrella for Perkins, the school districts in New England recognize it as a school with specific services for visually impaired kids, so it's well recognized as they've got quality personnel there. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going for further testing. So you're saying I can write to school and say we're going for further testing.
You have to have a meeting with the school and explain to them that you disagree, and they should have a form there for you to say you're disagreeing with something for you to sign off on that says that you disagree with the results of their testing and that you are requesting further testing. Right, two separate issues, right.
Right. So I'm not disagreeing. I just want to know where the problem is. I guess I want a name for it if I can get a name for it. I want to know what we can do to help.
And the district hasn't been able to.
No, well, this is I can't diagnose.
Correct.
It feels like I'm wasting my money. For instance, we went to Silver. It probably didn't hurt. I don't know if it helped or not. It was expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of feels that she's doing the same thing. Spending a lot of money, maybe not coming out with any results.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced that I can learn more about exactly where is the problem.
See, and the district would say to you, the district probably will not pay for further evaluations because you're not really disagreeing with them. You agree there's a learning disability for reading. You yourself just want to know more specifics. And so they'll say to you, but we know what the problem is, we know how to address it. And so we're addressing it. So if you want to go further, neurology or whatever else, that's up to you to do. Right, because you're not disagreeing with the diagnosis.
They're saying you don't have a problem, you feel like
Or we just went through a case where the parents refused to sign off on the IEP and said, we will go through someone else for it. They picked somebody from our district on the list and went through them, and so the district ended up paying for it. The one thing that if you're doing an outside evaluation, it's the obligation of the outside evaluation also to make sure they get the records from the school district to see what has been done. Because remember, some of these tests cannot be given more than once every couple of years or once a year. And so if you go to an outside eval and the child has already had an IQ test 2 months ago, that person cannot use the same test. It invalidates it. So remember that piece of it also. Okay. For reavals, it's optional under the new law, IDEIA, saying that every 3 years they have to be reeval. Now it's every 3 years the parents have to agree to it. The parents can say, no, I don't want to. My personal recommendation and NAPI's recommendation is never to turn down an evaluation at 3 years because vision changes, things change in your child's life and your family life, and so if the district says that we really don't see any changes and we don't think the program will change, we recommend no reeval. You have the right to say, wait, no, I still want a full-blown reeval every 3 years.
Is it a two-way option, meaning the parents go to school district and say we don't want them to do evaluation?
Yes. Yes, but if you disagree with the school district, then they have to do the reeval if you want it. Okay?
How do they want to put on 501? Is that
504?
Thank you. And I don't agree with that. I don't
I just went through this with, we moved to a new school district this year. My daughter was on.
Sorry, he's videotaping. I just want the kids to come up and talk.
I just went through that this year. My daughter was on an IEP at her old school. Now she's in first grade, and they wanted to put her on a 504. For the school district I'm in now, they just approached the funding differently. But in Pennsylvania, where I was, they wanted her on an IEP because then they knew they could get funding for it. And in that state, they didn't have to. She was not delayed in any way. And so she didn't need to be on a IEP. I like the IEP because I have another child on the IEP and I knew what to do. In Washington, where I'm at now, they insisted on the 504 because they said the state would not allow the IEP because she was not delayed in any way. My concern, and probably your concern, is we don't want her to become delayed and then you put her on an IEP.
I have parents that the first note tell me that the way the law is written as though children have the right to work to their full potential. And so if your child needs to be a priority, that still means that they have the right to the service so that they can achieve.
Right. For us, I mean, and all children are different. We went with the 504 because she is reading at her level or a little bit above her grade level. She's in first grade. She's reading. They are enlarging everything that needs to be enlarged for her. There's some computer work that somebody is helping her with so she can see. They're making all the modifications and all the adaptations that need done, and she is receiving no specialized instruction. The vision therapist comes, there's actually a blind child in the school, so she's there every day. She sees her often. She enlarges some Judy B. Jones books for her. They made them like this big. But that is not, they don't need to, she doesn't need to be on an IEP to see the vision therapist in this district. Now in Pennsylvania, she has to be. So it does work differently. But I expect next year, because there's some equipment that we want to use, it's not available except for special education children. Next year she will be on an IEP, and that's what the school district has agreed is fine with. This year she just didn't need to be. And what we did when we agreed to the 504 was I let them know that if at any point we feel she's struggling or falling behind, we're going to want to change. And that was in the notes. They agreed. They said, oh yeah, we'll do that. Whether they would have, I never had to find out. It was just something it was just a closed circuit TV. And I don't know if she's going to need it, but in this school district, the vision therapist actually helped us out and said, yeah, I can't get this for her unless she's on an IEP, which I think is ridiculous, and I could have fought that, but I didn't need to. And I don't know if she's going to need it or not.
Let me explain something before we go further. 504 IDP. IDP is the special education law that you sit down, you write out all the forms, and you get all specialized services and equipment for your child. Braille books, large print books, CCTVs, magnifiers, etc. 504 is a federal law. It's not necessarily an education law, it's an accessibility law. So the 504 means that if your child does not need any vision services in the sense of, as Keith just said, his district is really unusual on this piece. Most 504 kids do not get vision services, will not get equipment, they will get the large print books possibly. 504s mean that your child just needs to be monitored in the classroom to make sure things are going well. Okay, there's a big difference between the two.
So if you have a student on a 504, at what point do parents have the same rights for that 504 to ask the district for a reevaluation to see if the IEP is necessary?
At that point, it's not a 504 anymore. If you want an evaluation, all you do put it in writing and saying, I want my child evaluated for special education.
Because the IEP, you have to do it every year.
Right. Every year you need, it has to be reviewed every year. 504s are reviewed every year also. But it's it's got nothing to do with special ed in the sense of IEPs, okay? Sure.
Okay. I can't say what our outside is, but I'm new and I'm even realizing more, much you were very fortunate when it comes to eyesight. At our school, she didn't qualify for vision health unless her good eye was as bad as her bad
I should be videotaped right now. I do things, I'm a teacher of the vision impaired, I'm a parent of a child with additional disabilities. I was brought up, as you heard, more than 30 years ago, I got my degree, and in those days, the cutoff was 20/70 or worse. Don't write this down because it doesn't mean anything in my opinion anymore. 20/70 or worse meant the child was partially sighted, they received services. We would monkey around with the numbers if they were like 20/60 to get them so that they would get services. Nowadays, there's what's called a learning media assessment that every visually impaired child should have, learning media assessment, as well as a functional visual assessment. Two different things, okay? Functional vision assessment, so you might hear it called FVA. And what the person, it has to be a certified teacher of the visually impaired or a low vision clinic or a low vision doctor who will come in, your child will go and they do a functional vision. Meaning, how are they using their eyes in a darkened room? How do they use their vision when they're transferring from indoors to outdoors? All of that functional things. Do they see the curve? Do they recognize the stairs? You know, all of that. How far away from the board do they need to be? Can they see a whiteboard if the teacher writes on it in red versus blue? That's a functional visual evaluation. Anything? Teacher of the visually impaired, certified teacher. Or a low vision clinic. Should be a certified vision teacher because they, remember the law says that the person doing it must be trained in the area in which they're assessing. So if they're just an assistant who's been, like I have an assistant that works with me in my school district, she does not do any evals whatsoever. I do all of the evals. Because I had the training, she doesn't. I've trained her, but she hasn't had the formal training in the assessments. Even if I trained her in it, it would not be considered formal training. Do you understand the difference? Okay. What I did with the student who
helps us with that issue and
both. What I did with whenever I have a student who is not reading up to grade level, and if I can't honestly say it's due to his vision or her vision, I just don't know, there may be a learning disability. What I do is I go to the learning disability teacher or the reading teacher or the reading specialist, whoever, whatever name they go by in the school district, and say, I have a student. Now, you might put that in writing, a request in writing if your VI teacher's not doing it. Put it in writing saying you want a reading assessment done. If the VI teacher isn't comfortable doing it, then what happens is, what should happen is the VI teacher goes with your child to the reading specialist. Make sure whatever the reading specialist is using is the appropriate size, etc. For instance, when I did one with a young man, he was in second grade, he was using a CCTV at the time. So we did the test under the CCTV, and when things came up, because vision teachers and we as parents look at things differently once you have a visually impaired child. You know, that piece of garbage on the street may not be a piece of garbage to us because my kid's never seen. So you might stop and point it out. So I sat there, I had no interaction with the student at all, just made sure the equipment was running. But if a picture came up that was really abstract, and I knew as a child with vision wouldn't pick up on the nuance of the picture that the question led to, I would say to the reading teacher, vision. So that she had a good idea of what vision was impacting and when it wasn't impacting. And it turns out this young man ended up having a learning disability. He ended up in resource along with my services for a couple of years, and now he's reading on grade level. So remember, we're looking at vision and how it impacts, but doesn't mean our kids don't have other issues going on. that have nothing to do with vision. We just have to make sure when the testing's being done that their vision needs being met. Okay? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Keep question. Functional vision eval, thank you. So that's how your child uses their vision in the environment. That doesn't mean just in the school environment. It means in the neighborhood. It means in and out of movie theaters, that sort of thing. Now, they might not have to take them to a movie theater because you can always shut the lights off in the auditorium of the school and walk them in and see how they do. So that's that one. Learning media assessment. What that is the teacher needs to, there are forms out there, there's plenty of ways to do this. Find out if your child is a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a combination, or even a non-reader. So that if it ends up that your child is a visual learner, that leads to large print, etc. Oh, tactual is the other one. Vision, auditory, or tactual. So tactual for Braille. Okay, so that learning media assessment, there's a program that you go out there, Texas School for the Blind has it. If you want to go on their website, you can see what it looks like. And teachers should be doing that also by law every 3 years, if not more often. Teachers visually impaired. Yes. Learning media assessment is functional vision eval. Because if the child's vision changes at all, it might change something. Learning media doesn't necessarily change that much over every 3 years. And if they're working with a VI teacher, a good VI teacher, they'll see that happening anyway and change the size of the print.
So, federal law, that 2070 or whatever, is that out? Or?
Yes and no. I mean, it really depends on your school district. You can always, if they're adhering to that, I would still go back and say, I want to see the functional vision eval. Because if you see a child, for instance, if they do the functional vision eval, and it turns out there's things on it like your child can't see the blackboard unless they're sitting in a specific place in the classroom, etc. Yes, that can be covered under a 504 because that's just a matter of moving the desk, moving the child's seat. But if they can't see, for instance, I have a family with 2 children with albinism. I've been teaching how many years? Father came to the IP, mother could come to this one. I'm sitting there and he comes out with this statement and I'm sitting there going, I've been teaching 31 years and I never heard that before and how profound that is. I mean, we really do know our own children better than anybody else. He stood up there and he said, no, he's going to get the services because when my child looks at the board, he can see it, no problem. He's got like 20/60 vision, okay, with corrected lenses. But when he comes back down to his desk, and I knew this, but I just never verbalized it in an IEP meeting, he doesn't know where he is when he looks back up at the board. And so that's why he needs vision services. That's how his vision impacts his learning. He has learned, because he's in 8th grade now, how to accommodate for that, because we've worked on it. But for the regular education teachers to hear that made more sense to them than anything I could have said as a VI teacher. And it never dawned on me to say things like that in an IP meeting. You know, be that specific. So we always learn. Can I get her question?
So I have a 3-year-old. He's entitled to a functional vision test via TBI as part of the license plan.
Yes. 3-year-old?
3-year-old.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My question is partly a comment for the parents. He was evaluated first by the school district at 8:30 in the morning when he was fresh and doing well. He was also evaluated for vision by the ophthalmologist at 8:30 in the morning, and very well on that. So by the end of the day, his vision was not as good, and his skills are not good. So the recommendation of the parents is schedule your test in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, you can always, remember as parents, you have some control over when things are happening. And if you know your child's vision is worse at one part of the day or something, and you're looking for services because, and I don't think that's wrong to do, schedule it at a time when you know your child may be at his worst.
So with that, I guess the question of reevaluation. The school district that is getting on well is the services. If I ask for reevaluation, I'm really saying because I think it's not always doing so well, it is appropriate to ask for reevaluation.
Has he had a functional vision done?
Not by school district. He's got one scheduled by private,
School district doesn't pay for, who pays for his teacher and vision impaired?
well, the president are paying for it, but he hasn't had one done by that.
Well, the district can accept anybody else's evaluation. If he's coming from one district to another district, they can just accept that paperwork. They don't have to redo the whole thing.
Okay. But he hasn't had a functional vision test.
Then you need to request a functional vision,
Okay,
yes.
and another question, he did so well in every area but fine motor. Fine motor, he was normal, not technically a delay, but I think given the voucher for it. Delay, what does the law say about that with regard to school?
The school psychs will tell you there's going to be a discrepancy in 2 areas to get services.
So, a really low fine motor when everything else is really high, and then
Right. That it may or may not be. I mean, you can argue the issue with them and say, you know, if he doesn't get the services now, he's not going to be able to write, he's not going to be able to do this, this, and this. And a lot of the school districts will service them. Is he in a program now?
he's in a program, the Anchor Center in Denver.
Oh, say hello to Jay for me.
Yeah,
Talk to Jay about it and see what she says. Have you talked to them?
yes, but they're basically saying, you can take it as a school district or take practically here. Financial issues.
Yeah, I mean that is the case when there's only one slight change in their testing that the districts don't necessarily pick it up. They'll monitor the kids to see and pick them up if they start seeing a downward turn.
Right.
But we all, you know, the other thing is, yes, the law says the school district's liable to pay for all services, but just as any other parent who doesn't have a child with a disability pays for dance lessons and pays for other kind of lessons, sometimes we have to choose priority-wise what we're going to pay for our kids. You know, I paid for gymnastics for my child because it helped her with her balance and stuff, and it was over and above what the school district do. So some of this stuff, think about if you can afford it, going privately and getting some services.
Are they entitled to free preschool?
Excuse me?
Are they entitled to free preschool if they have a disability?
Yes.
Okay, I've read
Every child who, I mean, the law states that the minute, well, you know, infants get services too under Part B, Part C, so it's at public expense.
We were told that because it doesn't have delay, all it's got is a vision, we have to pay for preschool tuition to get the
No. No, because vision impact, do a functional vision analysis. Show them. I see kids all the time in our public preschool in my school district that are just visually impaired but are not severely delayed, and they're in the public school preschool getting vision services. So I'm modifying the materials and everything else and working with the teachers saying, well, let's make it this way, let's turn it so it looks like this so the kid can benefit from the services.
Thank you.
The what? I don't know. What CIU 20? What is it? Right, in Amazon it's an ISFP.
Yeah, we had that until he was 3, and then when he turned 3, everything's all professional.
Yes, once the children, from birth to 3, divisions of developmental disability, early childhood divisions, every state calls it something else. They get services out of the State Department usually. The State Department may contract with private agencies to do that, but they get home services, and it's called an individual family service plan instead of IEP. Once the child turns 2 years, 6 months, between 2 years, 6 months and 2 years, 9 months, that agency goes to wherever the child's school district is and says, we have a child of this age. The school district now takes over and you go begin to do the IEP process. Okay, so the early intervention people drop out, the school district picks up. And then it's the school district you work with from till they graduate from high school.
Does the learning media assessment include or should it? Because we're having issues with, she wants to be in orchestra, she wants to be in band, and even the vocal music, she reads music, we can't get it in large.
Does she have a VI teacher?
Oh, yeah. The VI teacher is a musician, so she.
No, but wait a minute. Oh, take that. All right, as a visual teacher of the visually impaired, I strongly believe our role is not tutoring. We do not teach subject matter unless it's a child who's doing Braille and you have to teach him Nerman code and all that. That's a different bag of beans. We're there to modify anything and everything the child needs in order to fully participate in public school education. So therefore, if a child is taking band, taking choir, taking art, taking PE, any of those specialized service classes, the VI teacher is part of it. And so I go to the band leader and say, you get a visually impaired kid who's qualified, who's taking band, you need to give me whatever materials you're using this semester so that I can get them in lunch. And that's how, the VI teacher's responsibility is to get the materials enlarged or modified to meet the child's needs.
Okay, so at this point, we can't get these band for her to.
Oh, okay.
So then, what next? Do I ask the district to pay for this software that provides music, reads music for her, or what happens next? I guess we can't get big enough without it being.
Just my personal experience with that, because all my kids were in music, got very advanced in it. Just developing new techniques, and often they would have to look at the music, get it up really close, or put it under CCTV, and then memorize it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't.
Right.
You have a map in front of them, and things. So you have to, and the vision teacher can work on developing techniques for memorization and things like that. But I think that would be a solution.
Okay.
Yeah, and they depend more on their auditory memory than they do on their vision in that case. But the role of the vision teacher is in all of those classes.
And I think that's where we're having problems, is she hasn't really been in all the classes with our daughter to truly evaluate how she's functioning in those other areas.
You might just go back to, have you talked to her about that?
A little, yeah.
I would go back, I would first make the attempt to talk to your VI teacher and say, this is what I expect. Not that you're going to teach your music or anything, but I just would like you to go in and look at what she's missing so that you can help us modify it. And if you don't get any results that way, then go the next step up, special ed director or whoever. But remember, keep your kids in mind that you're there for them in that respect. And if you have to step on toes, you have to step on toes to get services, but be nice about it. In all honesty, don't go in like you're going to just get real angry and everything else, because then just walking in the room with that look on your face kills whatever thing you're going to get anyway. So, over here, yes. As you can see, we're not following. Mm-hmm. No, in school districts, I don't know if you hear what this mom just said. Her daughter's going into kindergarten next year, and the school district's recommending an aid for her daughter, and she has some additional disabilities, anxiety, depression, and eczema. And so they're putting an aid in. I would assume that, what's the aid's role? Have they defined the role of the aid? But you have an IEP? Do you have anything written in the IEP saying what the aid is supposed to be doing?
She's going to,
Right.
and then we're going to help them
Mm-hmm.
and then
more on the playground and for safety's sake. Whether, is there a VI teacher involved with her?
We're very responsible.
So who's the decision maker on the IEP in terms of what needs to be modified, what doesn't need to be modified? I mean, who's making that kind of decision for her?
Just the special education.
Is she going to be in the classroom with them?
See, they're hiring a new aide, and I don't know who it is, so I need to go in contact with them.
Well, my question is, if they hire a new aide who knows nothing about vision loss, how is that person going to know what needs to be modified or what doesn't need to be modified, what's vision and what's not vision related? You know what I mean? Within the classroom. So, how do they say that she doesn't need a vision teacher? What kind of testing did she get done prior to the IEP? Has she had a functional vision about that? You need to go back and ask for your functional vision about learning media assessment by a certified teacher. Is what you need to do. No. Free and public education. Let me take that back. If everybody in your school district, because of the way money's going right now, if every student has to pay for their books, you have to pay for your child's books. But if every student gets their books for free, you get whatever kind of books you need for free. Large print, braille, whatever. If schools give 2 sets of books to kids, you know, like for the regular kids, one to take home and leave home and one to use in the classroom, your child gets 2 sets of books. 2 sets of large print books, 2 sets of braille books. They cannot say, no, we're only going to provide for 1 set of books. Yes, it's more expensive, but they get both sets of books if the regular education kids get 2 sets of books. Well, every single state should have a state depository for braille and large print books. And so what happens is, I know Massachusetts, I know some states really well. What happens is the VI teacher goes and finds out what the books are for the next school year in the spring prior to the school year. Copies down the title, the author, the publisher, the copyright date, and the ISBN number. And there are forms to do this on. They submit those to the state depository. The state depository is then obligated to provide those books. The districts have to contract with the state depository, and that's where the money comes in, but we're not supposed to be worried about money, guys, remember, as parents. And they then work through the state depository to get the books. So a lot of them, they're just on loan. The kids use them for a year, send them back at the end of the school year, okay? Some of them are consumable so that the kids can write in them. If you're going to go, some school districts produce their own books, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the state depository will get them enlarged. Oh, that's interesting. Well, right, and if she's involved, obviously your TBI is involved, and she'll know what size print to enlarge them to. And then once you know that, it's easy to reproduce the books. But the school district better have the copyright law taken care of, because they can get in trouble for the copyright law. So,
We just went through that same thing. At the beginning of the year, we actually took every book that my daughter was going to use in first grade, and we just sat down and said, can you see this print and can't you? Not every book that she couldn't, there were a couple of books, only a couple that she couldn't see, and one was not available in large print. And so they had to enlarge it. Now that's not what they wanted to do. They at first said, well, we don't know what we'll do here. And so we told them, well, what you'll do is you'll enlarge the book. And that's what they did. They didn't do the whole book at once. They did parts of it because it had to get pretty big. It was a big book already. So I think the important thing is to remember they have, like Julie said, they have to provide. If they can't get a large print book because it's not in large print, that's what copiers do. They make things larger. They have to do it.
and the other issue, remember, there's such things as magnifiers, CCTVs. There's a lot of low vision equipment out there that our students can benefit from, and you don't have to get the books enlarged. And then their books look like everybody else's. They now have what's called a flipper, and my kids were using it till they hit puberty, and now it's like, I don't want to be different, I'm not using it. The flipper is a camera, and there's a couple of different companies that put them out, that if you turn the camera down, and there's a small screen in front of the child, about 12 by 12, enlarges the print, and they just read off the screen. If they flip it that way, they read off the blackboard. And it's called the flipper, so. There's a lot of software programs to put on the computers to enlarge materials. That's another piece. If they're in technology class, make sure they have the software that your children need to see the print, whether it's Zoom text or Big Word or something else, but make sure that's available. No, it was a couple of my students, they loved it. They loved it. They used it all the time. I had to do some socially appropriate use of it when they hit middle school, which, I mean, we have to do that with kids, you know, because they're just like any other kid, but they have to watch what they're doing. But then they hit a point where they didn't want to be different, so they stopped using it. And my experience has been, I like to expose my students to whatever's out there for them. If they use it, fine. If they don't, you can't force our kids to use some of this stuff because they want to be like everybody else, but at least they know it's available. And the flippers are still in the school. So if there comes a time when the kid really needs it to access something, he knows where it is. Correct. If you place your child in a private school district has there's a federal formula out there where the school districts have to look at all the special needs children that they service, the cost, etc., and then a percentage of that money has to be set aside for private school children within their district. That money, I'll tell you guys, is very little. Very little. And the majority of the students, and it's a first come, first served basis. It's not like in the middle of the school year you can go and apply for it. It's first come, first served, and the majority of that money, my experience has been, has gone to students who have speech problems. There's very little money out there once you're in a private school. Yeah, once you put a child in a private school, there's no, law doesn't pertain anymore. Right. That is exactly what the new law says. Excuse me? You don't have any. At that point, you have chosen not to access the public system. And that's the way the law looks at it. I mean, some private schools, in Arizona at least, now it's a private school, not a charter school. Yeah, okay. We've had one or two who have gone out of their way and done it anyway. You know, contracted with the state depository to get the books, that sort of stuff. But yeah, you have no rights at that point. You can check with the principal and see if there's money, or do some fundraising maybe. You know, find out how much it would cost to get the books. Oh. Go to a Lions Club. Go to a Kiwanis, and basically you ask them for the money, and then say, and my daughter will come and demonstrate, because they always are looking for speakers. That's how you get money, guys. You turn around and you say, I as a parent, or my child, if they're willing, will go and do a meeting for you, one of your monthly meetings. A lot of Lions Clubs will donate, will give you the money to buy equipment. Send them to camp, as long as they get some feedback from the families. I mean, it's a good source of money. And Lions Clubs are out there for visually impaired and deaf kids, so try, I mean, do any of those. The Eagles, the Kiwanis, raise some money that way. Somebody else had. Yes?
What kind of assessment it takes to get these kind of services? Because for our son, they said he can read something with a size 14 or more. You know,
Right.
And then, you know, we don't get these services because in his IEP says that he can read font size 14 or 14. Goes to the first grade, already 14.
So do you have a teacher with a vision impaired involved with your child?
Yes.
Okay. Then basically what that teacher should be doing or would be doing during the course of the school year is, and you could make notes and say, look, when my child is reading this close, you know, even though it's 14 font, he needs to bring it up within an inch. One of the things you got to remember is, the issue is not my child can read what size print. What you want to do as parents is to know that the issue is my child literate? Meaning, can he read and understand what he's reading and answer, comprehend what's going on? Sometimes our kids hold the print so close to their face that it takes them so long and so much energy to figure out what they're reading that they can't comprehend it because they're spending all of their time trying to read and they're not becoming literate. And you might want to look at either providing equipment so that it's a more fluent way for him to read, and or dual learners and introduce Braille to some of the kids. Because if the print size gets so big at a certain point, they're not functional anymore. Your kid's not going to be able to pick up a book and read, and that's the point of going to school, is everything's, you know, literacy is the big issue. And so your VI teacher probably will be looking at that and just make notes and tell her, you know, when he's at home and he's reading it, he has to hold it within so many inches. And then, can he tell me what he read or not? You know, check out some of that and let her know that.
We actually have a vision therapist at the school district for our daughter did the same thing. She said 14 to 16 font. We disagree. We actually had our eye doctor who provided us, this is the font she should have. And it was actually 18 in bold or 20 if it's not in bold. That's what she needed. The eye doctor could be a big help. We actually had a pediatric ophthalmologist who was great. He put a very detailed letter together for us to take to the school that had the font size in it. One of the important things, if you have an IEP and that 14 font you don't agree with, don't sign an IEP that has something you don't agree with. Because you're as big a part of that IEP team as the teachers and the therapists and everybody else is there. Your opinion matters as much. I like to think it matters more. But it's a team effort. And if you don't agree with what they have there, don't sign it. Make sure they understand that it's not right, you want to change. It doesn't have to be adversarial, but it absolutely, you're as big a part of that team as anybody else on it.
Request it. Bring it up to you. Tell them you went to this conference and you heard about all this equipment, and ask her if she can get it, if it's possible, and then go from there. And a lot of times the companies, in many states, there are small agencies that sell this equipment. Okay, so like for instance, in Phoenix, Arizona, there's 3 companies Foundation for Blind Children, there's a private company, and there's a low vision clinic that sells a lot of this equipment. And if you contact them, or your TVI contacts them, they will bring the equipment to the child and check it out with them. And then if it's appropriate, then the TVI can go back to the school and say, you know, this does work and we should look at buying it for the schools.
How does it work for equipment at home? My TVI told me that if I only have my son is using his classroom right here, or he should be trying it at home. My district just turned out $20 slant for it for use at home.
Can you buy it yourself?
I can, but that's just the beginning.
I know, but I mean, that's some of the issues that we have to, you know, buy the $20 one, so when the $1,000 piece needs to be, you can say, look, I have been providing this at home, it's your turn, kind of thing. There's no, it depends, you know, my experience is, it depends on the districts. Some of them do it, some of it don't. Under the law, there's nothing specific that says they have to have it at home. To my knowledge, I could be wrong. Does anybody? Yeah. It's not a must, it's an option. And some districts do it, some districts don't.
TVs at home and school.
See, see, it runs differently, I guess, in every state, but like in our state, in Arizona, the state depository, it happens to be housed at the foundation, they loan equipment to the districts. It doesn't cost them money for it. They pay a fee to utilize the, tell me if I'm speaking wrong, they utilize the fee to access whatever the library has. And so if the library has CCTVs, we just loan them out. And then I've had some from the state loaned and brought into the kid's house, but our district, because the district is responsible for that piece of equipment, has the parent sign off a legal document saying that if anything happens to it, they're responsible for replacing it. I mean, turn in. We got, just hold on for 1 second, that's right. Sue's got some transition issues too that are really critical to think about for your kids.
Okay, and as I was listening to Julie, I was making a couple notes to add some of my personal comments. I'm also a teacher visually impaired and then have two now adult children with albinism, so kind of specific to albinism, that's where I come from. The one topic on large print, I know many of you probably have children now very young or in grade school, and certainly request large print for all necessary areas, especially testing and things like that. It's really important. But my personal advice to you is just the more you can have your child read typical print with adaptations, the better. Meaning use reading regular print with a magnifier, handheld with the CCTV, because when you think about it, when it comes time to getting a job, the employers aren't going to have things in large print. You know, you're going to need to have gadgets or tools. So as much as you want large print books and use them, as much as you can get your child to learn to use other adaptations, the better. And they may need to hold things close. I mean, you have to kind of get over that. You don't want it to be so close that it is straining or causing, you know, a delay in reading. But that might be just their way of doing things, you know, so allow them to hold things close if that's what's needed. Especially, too, if they get older, they might get some high-powered magnifying lenses, and you have to, the focal distance is closer. So don't be afraid of the closeness. The website, Julie mentioned for the Texas School for the Blind that has the learning media assessment. The website, if you want it, it's it's www.tsbvi. It's the Texas School for Blind and Visually Impaired.org, and that's a great website.
What I would tell him or her is that NOAA is an organization that lets kids or adults with albinism to meet other people with albinism, and that we get to go to many exotic places, and it's awesome, especially the pool.
I'm over to see my friends, everybody that I share this with, and, where I'm from, it's only me with albinism. I feel left out.
Not being the only
albino person, like there are like so many other people, and I don't feel like left out and all that stuff.
I'm just gonna say, like, don't be ashamed to get up close or something, and like do what you need to do to see stuff and things like that. Because it'll really help. It'll really help you, and if you take time to do these things, you might get a head start from regular people.
Yeah, like go to NOAA. It's like if you're feeling left out, go to NOAA, because I mean there are other people who have albinism. You wouldn't feel left out. You can like share experiences. It's like
I felt left out, and when I found out about NOAA, I feel
just seeing other people, because this is the first time I saw other people with albinism, and you know, just what they're like.
And my friends that are albino over there, I get to reconnect with them every 2 years. And I just like to socialize and meet other people and discuss with them.
I'm having a lot of fun. It's pretty cool because my brother has albinism also, but he's 11 and I'm 14, so I wanted to like see people my own age. I certainly do. There's like a whole bunch of people walking around. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of cool.
Like me too. Like I really want to drive, so I really want to get like information about that too, and then just jobs and college and yeah.
All you kids with albinism out there, and for everybody, just want you to understand that it's a great thing, not a disease. Great thing.
Yeah, people saying it's contagious, it's not. It's not a contagious, horrible disease. It's awesome.
I'm harmless. I don't bite hard.
Oh yeah,
You don't bite much.
And for those of you who think that we're freaks, we're not.